We'll start with a selfie of us all. So yeah, it's great to be back in Australia. It's a bit warm, especially for someone who grew up close to the Arctic Circle in north of Sweden. But you know, I'll manage. My topic today is how autonomy saved one of Spotify's most loved features from being killed, with the alternative title of or how we accidentally fixed Mondays. And I'm going to come back to what that actually means. But as we just heard, I'm a consultant at Better Product Work, a company that I started just 1 week ago, so it's pretty new. But we believe it's a group of people with experience of product model type, Spotify type corporations or companies. And we believe that the conventional way of building products is kind of broken. And we work with visionary leaders to challenge convention and find new and better ways to do product development. But I was also at Spotify from around 10 teams to 200 teams. So that's a little bit what I will talk about today. So, but first, how many of you, is there anyone who don't know what Spotify is? Raise your hand. Can't see anyone. Great. Penetration. Wow. So it's a music streaming service. How many of you know what Discover Weekly is? Most or many, I'd say, not everyone. Okay, so don't worry, I'm going to tell all of you. So you probably know what a playlist is, though. Kind of the mixtape of my youth. You can put together a lot of different music into a list and give it a name. So here we have, for instance, let's see if we can get this to work. You can see the pointer. Yep. Summer Rotation by Joakim Sunden. That's a list that I've created. Or here's Funk Outta Here by Spotify, a playlist that I've chosen to follow. But then, all of a sudden, one day, for the first time, something pops up in the area for user-generated content called Discover Weekly, made for Joakim Sunden. Well, this is unheard of, just popped up. I didn't follow it, I didn't create it. And we'll come back to why that's important. But once I click Discover Weekly, I get 30 songs that I've never listened to before, at least not on Spotify app. Spotify doesn't know if you listen to it anywhere else, not yet at least. Who knows? And there's a high chance that I like, if not all, but then most of these, or at least can find a few new favorites. So that was quite a feat. But now you know a little bit what it is. Let's go back in time a little bit. Do you remember how you used to do to find music before Spotify came? Maybe something like this. This is Amoeba Records in California. And I could spend an hour easily, browsing through CDs and try to find new music, maybe listen to some of them. My music nerd friends at Spotify could probably spend a day or more in a store like this. My mom, on the other hand, if we were to visit, let's say, Los Angeles, she might look into the store and say, yeah, you know what, I'm going to hit the clothing store across the street. She loves music, but she's not that interested in music, if you know the difference. And I'm going to get back to why it's important what my mom thinks. It actually has value to the story. But then Spotify came along and did this, search. So any of you used Napster back in the day? Or, I mean, know of Napster maybe? Okay, yeah. Kazaa, DC, Direct Connect, yeah, Pirate Bay. There are many ways of illegally downloading music, but still a lot of people were doing it because it was free. So I was among them in my college or university years. You would go to parties and, oh, do you have Napster? And you would search for music. If you were lucky, you would actually find what you were looking for. If you were even more lucky, it wouldn't take forever to download. And if you were even luckier, it was actually the right thing once you downloaded it and you could play it. So the big feat then of Spotify, almost all the music existed, and it started playing instantaneously. And I thought it was so cool. I was just put thing after thing into it, and it just started playing. It had even the more obscure things that I liked. But showing it to my mom, she's like, what is this? What do I do? Well, search for something that you like. What do you like? The Beatles? oh, they're not at the service, complicated, but yeah, it's fixed now, by the way. The Rolling Stones, she searched for that, and it starts to play. Great, everyone's happy. So back at the Spotify headquarters, our founder, one of the founders and the CEO, is still the CEO actually. Yay, we've nailed search and play. That's awesome. But there's a problem. If you don't know what you want to listen to, our product is useless. Okay, that's a little bit exaggerated maybe, but it's hard. So we know that we play a big role in our users' lives when it comes to lean-in use cases. That's what we call them. People who are happy to access all the music in the world through a search bar. Early adopters, technology evangelists, and so on. But lots of more people want a little more guidance, and we're still not performing as well as we could in the lean-back mainstream use cases, as we started referring to them as. And we need to understand why and try to solve this. This was the strategic intent that the leadership set to the organization. So we've made some attempts to reach this audience. That was less of an effort compared to search and creating playlists and so on. Radio. So in the early days, you could feed a decade and a genre into it. So 70s jazz or 80s rock, something like that. And then later you could seed it with a song or a playlist and so on. And we didn't see any really great uptake or uplift in the engagement from these type of users. Personally, I believe that it's because people who listen to radio, well, they listen to radio, they don't listen to Spotify. So then we tried, influenced by Pinterest, as you may see, and Netflix-style recommendations like, so you listen to Of Mice and Men, maybe try Motionless in White. And again, the music nerds at the company love this. It's like, wow, there's a connection between these two, I didn't know. That might be good. And you could scroll forever and ever and ever. It never stopped. Again, music nerds loved it. My mom, well, she wasn't super happy getting up Sunday morning, spending 30 minutes scrolling through Pinterest-style recommendations and then find something to listen to. She just wants to tune in. Oh no, drop out. No, that's another thing. So at this time, some music industry pundits or talking heads were suggesting that, you know, mainstream users, they aren't that interested in discovering new music. They're content with listening to, you know, same old. So there's no use building these algorithms or recommendations for them. So there was actually, this sentiment was also prevalent at Spotify, but there were a group of engineers, or a couple of them, who wouldn't believe this. They kept thinking about this problem. And they said, there must be a better way. And they presented this idea to the product manager. And he said, well, yeah, it seems reasonable. So that's not good. Let's bring in a product designer to challenge it, play the role of the bad cop. Because most of our ideas, how intuitive and obvious they were, turned out to be wrong. So let's kill it as fast as we can. So the designer said, you know, why do we need this feature? It's so bloated already. Mainstream lean-back users need a really simple app. We shouldn't add more things that risks complicating it. We must keep it simple. And I don't know if you remember, but at this time, Apple Music was fairly new, and they had a collaboration with U2 and put U2's new album in every user's library. Anyone remember this? Okay, yeah. And what was the reaction? Well, they thought they were bringing a gift, and to many people they were, but a lot of people were really, really upset, like insanely upset in my view, but they really hated it. And people took to Twitter saying things like, it's as if, you know, I'm coming downstairs to have breakfast and there's Bono sitting in his underwear eating my sandwiches, and, you know, this is a violation. And the problem was that it wasn't easy for some reason to remove the song or the album. So they had to put out an emergency removal tool and, yeah, all of that. So there was a sound argument to be made that we shouldn't put things in the user's library. So that was a strong opinion against this thing. So what it really was, the discover Pinterest style that I showed earlier, that was an algorithmic recommendation that we tried to use. And the two engineers had this idea that there's a feature at the end of the year called Year in Review. Now it's called Wrapped. Maybe some of you have seen it. It actually released, or this year's version came a few days ago, where you can see all your listening from the year. What's our top 5 artists, top 5 songs, and so on. And people share this, and they figured that let's use this discover algorithm on all the music listening history for this year, and create a playlist from that called Play It Forward. That was fun. So they did that and didn't think much of it. But then in March, they looked at the data, and they saw that this is still being used by millions of users. So this is really high engagement. There's something to this. So that's how the idea was born. And it was basically data from 75 million users, how they listen to this music. There was a proven user interface, the playlist, super intuitive, loved by every user. An algorithm that could put songs into micro-genres, so say that this song is probably similar to that song and that song, which makes it easier to recommend songs. Then it's used collaborative filtering. You know what collaborative filtering is? Maybe not all. So let's say, is someone here using Discover Weekly? Okay, you're using it. So let's say that you've created a playlist, you've spent a lot of time into your favorite playlist or your current songs, and maybe it's 20 songs, let's say, and you're thinking that you're this unique snowflake, only I in the world have these 20 songs. But yeah, of course, no. We can find lots of users who have roughly the same songs, if not exactly the same songs. And what if all of these users, let's say that 80% of them have 3 songs in common that you've never listened to on Spotify. There's a chance you might like them. So that's basically how it works. And then it's a little bit more complicated, unfortunately, but that's a separate session. So they had this idea. Great. So now what? Can we do it? What would it be like in your company? Because in the most companies that I worked with, except Spotify, engineers won't even be thinking. They won't be awake at night, challenging what the know-it-alls in the company say about the situation. They wouldn't challenge that. They wouldn't come up with these ideas. If they came up with another designer said, this is a really shitty idea, it would be very hard for them to make it happen. But not at Spotify, because in traditional organizations, so many people that when I talk to leaders or executives, they really believe in, well, of course, people on the floor, people in the teams, they should make a lot of the decisions. They are the experts. It sounds super reasonable. We shouldn't do it. They don't want to micromanage. They only want to set goals and directions and guidelines and so on. But they're also responsible for that we're doing the right thing. So how do we do that? So traditionally, or you could say bureaucratic or plan-driven organizations, people were suggesting that, oh, but maybe if we only focus on the big things, projects, initiatives. Okay, but how do we decide which project we should run and how we should prioritize them? Well, we build a business case or we do a return of investment, cost-benefit analysis. Okay, so what will it cost? And what will the return of value be? Yeah, then we have to decide a lot of things. We need to know who's going to be involved and so on and so forth. And suddenly you have locked down a lot of the decisions in early analysis that you said that you would ideally leave to the teams. So you get these detailed budgets, toll gates becomes the only way of seeing are we moving towards the goal. And in middle management, the only thing you can do, you're not responsible for that, whether we're making the right thing or not. So you're focusing on resource allocation, delivery on plan, budget, time, scope. And when we grow the companies, we have departments to make it easier to recruit and have professional development and so on. All makes sense, very good ideas. But unfortunately, we also build silos between departments, which makes collaboration between departments hard. And we don't really have any feedback between the front lines and the top, because projects take a long time, and not until we've actually delivered them, then we'll know. And if we use the assumption that if we ask users, internal users, or if we ask our experts what we should build, and we build roughly that, okay, often not exactly and often not on time, but still, then we're done. We did a good job, right? And often, because we are late and there's so much to do, we are too busy to check if we were even doing the right thing. So Spotify shows another path that we called autonomous squads. And the CTO, who stood for many of these ideas, is that the most important feature of the organization is the autonomous squad. All other features in the organization are designed to support this mini startup-like squad. So that's the extent to which we took the metaphor. It should be a mini startup. And when I came out of Spotify, I started going around in the world, and people were also talking about autonomous team and autonomy outside of Spotify, and I thought, oh, great. But then when I started scratching the surface, it turned out that what most people meant with autonomous teams was independent, that they could release independently. Not that they could also decide what ideas to pursue, how to solve the problems that they were given. So I started talking a lot about autonomous squads and so on. Then this guy came along and had been talking about a similar thing as well, Marty Kagan of Silicon Valley Product Group, and he wrote a whole book called Empowered, and he chose the term empowered product team to describe this, used autonomous squad as an example. So I guess, yeah, he's more famous than me, so I started talking also about empowered product teams. But it's basically the same thing. The most important thing is to empower teams by assigning them problems to solve, then give the teams the space to solve them. And since then, Marty and I have collaborated and even wrote an article on the product model, how the Spotify model is really a product model, and it's all about this empowered product team, if you want to check that out. But it's basically synonymous. So why do we need this? Well, there are 4 risks in product development. One is that we're building things that aren't valuable or desirable. Customers won't buy it, or they won't use it. Or that we're not building things that are viable for the business, that it conforms with compliance and our business model and so on, that it's not usable, that users can't find it or don't understand how to use it, or that it's not feasible, that we can't, it's too expensive or too complicated, or it doesn't work with the technology we have. But the thing is that all of these 4 interact all the time, and the solution space and the problem space are moving concurrently and inform each other all the time. So, for instance, as the Discover Weekly example showed, it was existing technology, already existing systems, very little new development really. It was because it was the engineers, they were working with the enabling technology every day. They were in a unique position to understand what is now possible. If you know the Henry Ford thing, my customers would, if I would have asked my customers, they would have said faster horses. So they don't know what to ask for. The engineers, that's where a lot of the innovation comes from. So they need to be involved in actually suggesting what things to do or what things to try. So, new idea, great. We can decide ourselves, but how do we define success? How do we know if this is something worth actually pursuing? So we focus on outcomes and business results, not output. And just to make sure everyone is on the same page. So we can see the world that we're living in now. We see needs that go unmet, or pains for the users, or friction, or bad results for the company, which gives us a lot of ideas on, yeah, we could fix this. This could be improved. This could be better. And this leads to products and features and enhancements. Unfortunately, sometimes also to requirements and specifications. And it's easy to fall in love with your product and solutions. Some people even fall in love with the requirements, believe it or not. And we lose focus on, are we actually doing the right thing? Are we changing the world? Is this leading to different behavior that we want to see more of or less of? So the activities, epics, features, stories, whatever you want to call it, that's how we believe that we are going to reach our goals. And they are just hypotheses or bets. And they have to change if the numbers aren't improving. And worse, we are really bad at knowing what bets are the right ones. They have a very low success rate. As you can see from Ron Kohavi, who used to run experimentation and testing at Amazon and Microsoft. He says that the vast majority of new ideas fail in experiments, and even experts often misjudge which ones will pay off. So at Google and Bing, only about 10 to 20% of experiments generate positive results. So if you're not better than Microsoft or Google, maybe 80 to 90% of what you're doing, you shouldn't even do. Okay, that's customer-facing, end user things. Well, if you look at Microsoft as a whole, it's still 1/3 that prove effective. And there are lots of numbers from the industry on that shows around 1/3 of what we do is typically going to be something that works well. 1/3 have neutral results. But what's even worse, 1/3 have negative results. It's actually going to hurt us or our customers or both, and we shouldn't even be doing it. And if you look at internal projects, most of our solutions are useless. So this is a Standish Group chaos report that they've been doing several times in the last 25 years. There are different numbers. Some would suggest that even more than 60% of features that we build for internal products are never used or hardly ever. And 30% infrequently, or 50% here in this one from 2016. So we need to move away from opinions to data. So instead of saying we're working on X because Sam said it's important, we're done when Sam is okay with it or when the specification is fulfilled. No, we're working on X because we think it's going to give impact Y, which matters to Spotify because of Z. It's Z here, right? Yeah. We're done when the metrics have moved. Or in Google's word, let data drive decisions, not the hippo, the highest paid person's opinion. So instead of this, at Spotify, we use something that we call aligned autonomy, meaning that we have cross-functional squads, small and long-lived, self-organizing, focused on goals and outcomes, actual business results, and using feedback loops to actually understand, are we getting closer to that? And collaboration between squads, interacting directly, understanding when to collaborate and not, what dependencies do we have, managing them between themselves, rather than traversing manager hierarchies. And management focuses on vision, goals, strategic context, servant leadership, removing obstacles from squads, and so on. And we have transparent information flowing both ways. So what we learn on the ground actually informs the strategy. And then we set the strategy based on these data and insights that then informs what should the teams be focusing on. But it's not deciding exactly what, but rather what problems to solve. For instance, we learned that we were running experiments, collecting data, doing user research in the teams, that, we need to figure out this lean back use case. And then leadership understood the importance, and they turn it back and say, yes, let's focus on this for this quarter, half year, whatever horizon you plan for. So just there's a little bit of context, because this means that the organization shifts from gatekeeping to facilitating context. So gatekeeping context would be that product managers, designers who have access to product context, customer context, what is the market doing, competitors, what do the users say, they translate that into work items, backlog items, stories, activities, which means that the teams don't have any direct contact and no empathy and no engagement with the actual user. So instead, we want to facilitate context. How can we make all this context more easily digestible, more easily available for the teams, so that we can actually involve them in deciding, given this information, given what we hear and see, what do you think we should be doing? What's the best solution here? What's the best way forward? So just an example to understand what I mean. So this is, at Spotify, for instance, all developers would have access to metrics dashboard and can track and follow any metric they care about at Spotify. But it's a chance that they don't have the bandwidth to do all of it. They might not have the expertise and so on. So great that a product manager and designer can work together with analytics and figure it out and pull out the signals from the noise. What's the most important thing here? So we see a decrease by blah, 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 blah. And the number of registrations is dropping. You have to get more people to play without hurting recommendations, blah, blah, blah. So it's describing a problem to solve. It's not saying build this feature. And now we're inviting the team, okay, how can we solve this? And same with user research, where, okay, the team could probably watch it on live or participate in it or watch a recording of it afterwards, but it's also great that someone could tease out the more important details and present them to the team. So the Discover Weekly team, They were obviously not called Discover Weekly before Discover Weekly. They were called the Lambda team, actually. So they knew that it's all about engaging lean-back users. That's the strategic direction now. And we know what the metrics are: reach, depth, retention. How can we get more people to use Discover Weekly or our features for lean-back mainstream users? How can we get them to stay longer, and how can we get them to come back more often? So they could decide that, yeah, this is something that's in line with our mission. So they would just go off, a bunch of them, the 2 engineers, the product manager and designer, iterate a little bit on the solution, throw some things away, and after a couple of weeks, they had a cool enough app that they would fish food it, as Google calls it. That means the team is using it. Oh, cool, awesome. Just one thing, though. So they started using it and continuously improving and tweaking it. OK, now what? Now we have an even better prototype. Let's test it on our colleagues. Dog fooding, as it's sometimes called. So they didn't even announce it. They just snuck it out into people's playlists. And people started, what's this? They turned to Slack and said, do you know what team is making this? What is this? And they just was giggling in silence and looking at the metrics and seeing how it went viral internally. Until it was time to, OK, let's come out of the shadows. And they wrote an email actually asking people to try it out. And they used the playlist description in a novel way, adding a link to a Google form, explicitly asking for people's feedback and what they thought about it. So the rest of Spotify started using it and loved it and gave feedback. What's this? Wow. Awesome. Release it. It's as if my secret music twin put it together. Everything in it is good. And we got great survey results. So it was a done deal. Awesome. Now what? Maybe we're fooling ourselves again. We should try it with real users. So the CTO has said a team should be able to ship anything to 5% of its users. No questions asked, no permission needed. Just ship it. It's only music. So this was possible because we intentionally invested a lot both in culture and way of working to support this kind of ideas. So the CEO, again, used to say, we aim to make mistakes faster than anyone else. He often kept referring to this phrase, which might seem strange or stupid taken out of context, but of course it's in order to learn more than others. So both working on the cultural aspects of it, celebrating failure, teams started having failure walls, say this is what I did that was a mistake and this is what I learned from it. We even published blog posts about it. The CTO had blog posts about celebrating failure. If not X% of what you're doing is failing, you're probably not pushing and innovating enough. But also in the way we work. So decoupling the architecture so that you can safely make mistakes and be wrong. If you work for 5 years on a big project and it's totally wrong, that's going to be very bad. But if you only do try and minor changes and that one doesn't work, that's going to be OK. So if album art blows up, you can still listen to music. If notifications blow up, you don't get spammed, but you can still listen to music. And gradual rollout, so that if something breaks, we can quickly roll it back again. So we're modest. Let's do 1.5%. That's still 1 million users. So will they like it? Let's find out. So watching the data, we got 1,200 survey responses, very, very positive. User metrics, really, really positive. And the whole U2 thing was only mentioned by a couple of people in the survey. And they were still using Discover Weekly. So that turned out to be an exaggerated concern. So we also did what's called social sentiment analysis or monitoring, watching Twitter. So it's scary how well Spotify Discover Weekly playlists know me. Like former lover who lived through a near-death experience with me well. At this point, Spotify's Discover Weekly knows me so well that if it proposed, I'd say yes. Discover Weekly on Spotify eliminates the need for a musically knowledgeable boyfriend. Now I can be single forever, economical win. So yeah, pretty good positive sentiment on Twitter. So now we also could experiment much more because we had much more user data and do A/B testing. So early on we said, what should the cover art look like? Well, discover. It should be, of course, an astronaut on the moon. That's very discovery. So then we figured out, actually, what's the best way to get people to interact with personalized content? Well, that they know that it is personalized. If they get that it's made for you, they are going to want to interact with it. So let's do a picture of them, but with cool colors. Because we had a Facebook integration, we could take their profile picture, overlay it with colors and the logo, and wouldn't that be cool? No, said the engineers, the senior engineers and the architects. It's not cool because we have to build an entire content delivery network. It's going to be expensive. It's computationally expensive to get the profile pictures from 75 million users. What if they update it? There are so many reasons, again, that in a regular company, if you would have needed permission or budget and so on, it would have been no. But they could easily try it. And they saw a 10% lift in weekly average usage, which is huge in this context. So they knew that it's worth it. We tried what's the right length? 4 hours, 3 hours, 2 hours? 4 hours, said the music nerds. Probably not, but we tested it, and 2 hours was more reasonable. And this is where it's really great to combine quantitative and qualitative analysis. Because the quant, looking at the numbers and see, yeah, people prefer 2 hours, that we can tell, but we don't understand why necessarily. So then interviewing and talking to users, well, it turns out that 2 hours is 30 songs. If you would publish a playlist every week saying, these 100 songs you will love, it's like, have I even loved 100 songs ever in my life? And 30 songs, that was, oh, that little cute boy, girl that's coming to you with a mixtape that they've made. 100 songs? A stalker with a bunch of CDs, like, hey, I've made these for you. It's like, no. How often should it be updated? Every day. No, every week is enough. You want to keep people curious. If it's every day, it's like, yeah, I can't even be bothered. That's a new one every next day. And then, if we get it a little bit wrong, should we err on the side on too unfamiliar or too familiar? Well, let's make it too unfamiliar because it's discovery, right? You don't want, oh, you listen to When I'm 64 by the Beatles, you should check out A Day in Life because they're on the same album. You probably did listen to both of them off Spotify. So the funny thing here, though, is that there was a bug that made 2 songs that you've listened to recently appear in your Discover Weekly playlist. But instead of fixing the bug, we looked at the data, and it turned out that the bug performed better than the actual feature. And in qualitative analysis, we figured out that, okay, when they saw that there were these 2 songs, they're like, yeah, this I like, so maybe I like the other stuff as well. So it increased their trust in the algorithm. Yeah, and then there were some content mishaps. Still to this day, people complain about it. But I think it's a lot of guilty pleasure listening that informs the algorithm that they don't want to acknowledge. So the winning formula, we had 2 hours of personalized music recommendations, refreshed every Monday morning, delivered in a standard Spotify playlist, no new user experience needed, a playlist image based on the Facebook account, all songs replaced each week, which was also a killer feature because, you get the FOMO thing. Oh, what if I don't check in this week? Then I don't know. I will never know what I missed. And you would actually actively had to copy it to other or like the songs that you liked, or it would be gone forever. So no front-end development needed, 100% data informed. We have a winner. Awesome. But there's one problem. It didn't scale. So it was 75 million shared playlists from a single user that changes every week on the same day. And the playlist system wasn't built to handle that, which the team had been told over and over again. You can't do it. It won't support it. We're thinking about rebuilding the playlist system yet again. It's been on our backlog for a year or 2, so you should wait. Been on our backlog a year or 2. I guess we shouldn't wait, was the team's reaction. And they didn't. So, but now you had to undeploy, and people were sad on Twitter. Just like that, my Spotify Discover Weekly playlist was taken from me. I'm in mourning. I hope it returns soon. But now we had what's sometimes called a high integrity business case. We knew that this was a hit with a very high probability. We tested it on 1 million users. So we had a high priority now to sort out the tech issues. So it involved several teams and several months of work to really make it proper. But we knew that it was worth it. So we gradually rolled it out again. We tweaked the marketing message. We used the user's own language in the launch, so adding translation and all the fancy stuff. But it turned out, we showed through the data that Discover Weekly in English actually performed better because it was seen more as a brand or a feature in its own when it was in English rather than in the user's own language. And we used the Twitter buzz in ad campaigns like on the New York subway like this. Tweaked the packaging a little bit, released it. Discover Weekly reaches 1 billion tracks streamed in 10 weeks, our biggest, most successful launch ever. And on Twitter, Monday mornings, I take a bath and listen to Discover Weekly. Got really excited and started crying a little because I realized tomorrow is Monday and Spotify is making me a new Discover Weekly. It's actually so sad how excited I get for a new Discover Weekly on Spotify every Monday. Hence the claim that we accidentally fixed Mondays. Now Mondays is something to look forward to instead of dreading. Yeah, this is fun too. Tom Conrad, I don't know if you know who he is, but he's the co-creator of Pandora, Spotify's biggest competitor, bigger than Spotify at that time in the US. Okay, everyone is right. Discover Weekly is absolutely perfect. A little bit bitter there, maybe. So we believe that the ingredients of successful innovation is that you put people and problems into a fail-friendly environment with cross-functional teams where it's okay to throw things away and fail as long as you learn. And you do that by having enough slack and clear success metrics so that, and a feedback infrastructure so you can do user testing and get a feedback loop. Then awesome new stuff will come out in the end sooner or later. And I had shown this, done this talk at some internal courses and so on, and then Daniel did one of his rare interviews, the CEO again, with Fast Company. You've had some pretty successful consumer rollouts, like the Discover Weekly personalized playlist. I would have killed that if it was just me, 100%. Like, why would you have killed it? Well, I never really saw the beauty of it. I questioned them 2-3 times. Are you sure you really want to do this? Why are we spending all this time and energy? For a while, we didn't give the team any more headcount, any more funding in terms of headcount, but they kept working on it anyway. All of a sudden, they shipped it. I remember reading about it in the press. I thought, oh, this is going to be a disaster. And then, obviously, it turned out to be something really successful. It's one of the most loved product features that we have. There are lots of things in this company that I didn't think were good ideas that turned into some of the best things. And then it goes on to list these other things. I think this really shows the power of empowered product teams. It didn't mean anything that the hippo, the highest, really highest paid person's opinion in the company, the CEO and founder, he didn't like the idea. He didn't want to give it funding. He thought it was going to be a disaster. But still, because the team could use a low-cost experimentation way of proving their idea every step of the way, that's what ultimately mattered. So it's a hierarchy of competence and customer focus rather than a hierarchy of authority. So innovation can't be forced, just enabled and encouraged and supported. And managers can't make it happen, but they can create an environment to support it and stop it from being killed. Thank you.